And this came out of a reflective process, thinking about some of the students I've spoken to at different levels and how they actually think about their progress. So when you look at an undergrad, for example, when they finish, what they're thinking is, I'm doing a degree to get a job, either further my education. A lot of times, quite interesting, especially local students, they just want to take a break. They're not thinking of what they're going to do next. I have a few students that I'm like, what are you going to do? I'm just going to be traveling for the next 1 year, and then when I'm done, I'll think of what I have to do. At that point, you don't really have a lot of pressure. So, I mean, life is there for you to live and enjoy. And then some of them volunteering, again, not so much pressure because they don't have, of course they have bills to pay and things like that, but they're not under so much pressure with bills and things, so they can actually think about volunteering. I think it was in one of the meetings I was in, and I was saying, it's not the same. When I was doing my own program at the University of Glasgow, even when I finished my PhD at the University of Manchester, I did a lot of volunteering work. I wasn't so much on that, so I was, just like previous speaker said, I was single, so I wasn't really thinking about family or what do I need to do, bills. Fortunately for me, in my own case, I had that financial support, so I didn't necessarily have to work. So it was easy for me to finish school and think about volunteering roles. I remember when I finished my PhD, and then I got to Aberdeen. I was doing a volunteering role that brought me to Aberdeen. I was working with charity and I wasn't being paid. And then I got a job with Manchester. The first contract I got, I was probably earning like £200 a month. That wasn't even up to my traveling ticket. And my friend was like, are you crazy? I was like, no, just get your foot in the door, and then after a while, it will pay off. And it wasn't less than, I think it was just for that semester I did that, and they gave me a full contract, which is what I did for the University of Manchester for about a year or so before I moved on to the next university. So sometimes it could be very helpful, but I know it's quite tricky, especially when you have a lot of commitment. So that aspect of it is it's quite interesting. And it's not just a part of commitment. Also, one of the things I've learned with inductions is that even with the immigration rules around student visa, you can't do every volunteering role. Are you aware of that? There's restrictions around what kind of volunteering. So that's something that you need to speak to your immigration team within your university to be able to understand what actually does qualify as a volunteering role, and what can I do and what can I not do. Thinking about an MSc, you have obviously a lot of times you're thinking about getting a job, starting a business, furthering your education, and vice versa. The reason why I put that is because I'm trying to create a mindset of reflecting on why you're doing what you're doing, and then sometimes before our academic journey, so this is kind of me looking at before the journey, some of the things that actually do influence us doing what we're doing could be our pathway and experiences. So for example, depending on what country you've been, and you could have done an undergraduate in a certain topic and gotten a job in a completely different field, and sometimes that could impact why you decide to do a particular master's or further your education in a certain field or area. So it's just thinking about environment, family background. Some people, they are from a family of, you have to do education, you have to further your studies. You cannot just have a BSc. That's like the basics. So you find that there's just that need to kind of like progress. Some people could just be in terms of goals and ambitions and aspirations. For some other people, it could be mentors and coaches, people you speak to, uncles, aunties, that kind of influence what you do. They tell you, oh, you need to do this. In terms of progressing in life, this is what the pathway you need to go. For example, the case I said about me, it was my boss who said to me, no, you shouldn't just go to any kind of university. You need to think about what is the value of that university? How can you benefit in terms of having a certificate from that university? What can they give you? As well as thinking about your own input going forward. So those are the kind of things that can actually, and then your time invested. What do you invest your time researching when you're researching about topics, when you're researching about career pathway, when you're researching about cities, universities, and things like that? That could also inform your academic mapping. So that kind of moves you from, you get that stage and then you go into whatever you've chosen to do and you come into the university. So in terms of the next slide, I think this is where I want to really focus a lot of my conversation. So when you talk about classroom culture, what I've noticed in terms of international students is, especially when you come in and you've not really studied in this environment, it could be different and it could be daunting, to be honest. I was telling somebody, I remember when I first did my master's in Glasgow, I think I probably came a week late or something. And so that week I came on Monday, and I think on Friday we had a first course assessment, and about maybe we were up to 6 Nigerians, I'm not talking about from other countries because we were a very international class, and we all failed, we all got a D. And it was like, it's not that hard, it's not bad, like what really happened? But the interesting thing, which is what I was trying to tell someone, I said sometimes when you network and speak to people, you find out that you're not alone. Because sometimes you can't fight the battle alone. So what we did was, because we were plenty, and interestingly I had some very, you know how Nigerian people can be? We cannot be last. Why? So I had some guys that were like, no, we have to take this to the head of department. It was like, you know, this kind of student union moves. And we went to the head of department. And we went to the head of the business school. And there was a serious complaint that the guy had to go back to the lecturer and said, see, something was probably not done right. So you have to rethink about this, your program. Probably have a session with them to teach them and understand what exactly. And that was what happened. Obviously, it didn't change the university system because when we reset the course, they capped it. But at the end of the day, we all still passed, even though it was capped. But what I'm trying to say is that because of that communal experience, we were all able to come together and say, no, something isn't right. Yes, we are new. Yes, the system might be slightly different from what we're used to. So we also had a learning to do. But at the same time, it gave us that opportunity to be heard. And action was actually taken. So what I'm trying to say is that when you come into a classroom culture, it's understanding how things work and also trying to navigate your way around it. Don't be isolated. A lot of times we tend to be isolated. Let me do my work. Let people not see how I'm doing my work. Let's not share because it's competition. You're not expected to share in terms of people seeing exactly what you're writing because obviously that's going to flag up as plagiarism. But then having that conversation and discussing can be really, really helpful as well. In terms of classroom culture as well, some of the things I say is also understand, I know space and in terms of thinking about the course structure, some courses could be lecture, tutorials. Lecture, you could have it shorter, 1 hour. Tutorials, you could have it longer, 3 hours. I'm not sure which one I prefer because I've done it across different universities. I think I like the workshop longer because then I like the engagement. But I notice a lot of students don't like engagement. But I don't think it's African students, because I think we like to talk. But to be honest, it's one struggle I found out, even when we ask students, what is the challenge with group work? But you know what the challenge is? If you look at your own, I don't know, I guess we are from University of Aberdeen and University of Robert Gordon University, right? What's the population in terms of the students there? Local students, African students, Chinese, Indians? Which population do you see is the largest? Africans. I think in University of Aberdeen it's Chinese. So what you find out that when it comes to group work, people don't want to work together, or there's just that cultural barrier, as in like we're very vocal. Chinese people are not very vocal in class. So you find out that, okay, how do we even communicate? How do we speak? When they now give you a task, you find that struggle. I remember a few times students will always come and want to complain, but we say, well, you're adults. It's what you do in a company. It's your responsibility to make it work. So if you don't make it work, you all fail together, unfortunately. So with that kind of conversation, you find people trying to say, okay, no, I can't fail this. And when you understand the classroom culture, some students are a bit smart to understand who are the students that are a bit proactive and they go and group themselves together. Because I remember one of the classes I taught, I found out all the sharp, when I mean sharp, and they were very international. They were all together in the same group, and they were always getting really high grades because we're tapping from each other's minds. So I think that's something to understand the structure of the course. Are we going to be doing a lot of group work? Are we going to be asked to work together? Are we going to be working as individuals? How do we manage the relationship? How do we manage that approach so that we end up, because at the end of the day, doing an academic work, aside the fact that I tell people, I always tell my students this, what makes you different, especially when I was in the post-90, because I've worked in the post-90 university as well as a BRIC university as well as a Russell group. And I always tell them the difference between, especially post-90, and Oxford and Cambridge and the INSEAD, it's not necessarily the teachers, because every lecturer goes and if I want to get a job there, I'll apply and probably get something. But it's about you as a student. How do you come in in terms of your level of wanting to learn. And I think it's more about your networking. How do you network with the next person sitting next to you? Because let me tell you, wherever you are in the world, connections and network is what works. What I mean by that is, I was talking to someone in Scotland. We had a seminar, and they were teaching us around policy, impacting policy as education, as academics. How do you impact policy? And I remember the guy saying, a lot of times you find academics wanting to speak to an MP and trying to get in touch with an MP. And he said, really, it doesn't really work that way. It's actually how you connect with that MP. So it's who you know that knows who you know that knows and knows the MP. Because a lot of times it's not even the MP that does the work, it's the people around. And it's somebody actually referring to say, this person I've worked with, this person knows their onions, you can actually work with this person. And they're more interested to work with you. So it's not about having one really magnificent, interesting portfolio, but it's how do you connect with the people to be able to present your portfolio. So I always tell people, and those people, how do they meet themselves? Is in the classroom, is in the schools they went to, is in the meetings or the places they went. So it's very important for us to kind of nurture those relationships. And I think it's one of the slides I actually put in terms of platforms, support platforms, how you build, thinking about building relationships, identifying relationships and things like that. The other side I would really pay attention is attendance and assessment. Unfortunately, as time has gone by, the academic environment is not just academic environment. You find out that especially around immigration, there's a lot of immigration influence around the academic environment. What does that mean? For those who are students, you know you do a lot of monitoring, right? They get a lot of monitoring systems for you guys. Unfortunately, it's not always been like that. But I tell students it's very important. It's like they're looking for every avenue to, not necessarily looking out for, but if you don't kind of follow the rules, you fall prey to it, basically. So I tell students, attendance is very important. At the University of Aberdeen, using the business school, for example, we take it. So for example, if you miss attendance, there will always be that question like, are you okay, what's going on? But unfortunately, because the Home Office has requested that information be passed on to them, it will be passed on to them.